physical culture and the training of men to be non-toxic and such like, which, see, these two are now being separated by American female psychologists, and of course it will fail because this is just something coming out of mostly the end of psychology, that you find a lot of people who write a lot, but they don't cure a lot, and they don't treat a lot, and they probably don't therapy others a lot, and but they like writing. They like writing about men being toxic. So the whole thing with, especially what happened with the kettlebell challenge, as I was getting into, the kettlebell challenge offered a very interesting thing. Kettlebells have a way of being extremely intense as a training method. So there's a way that you have to get used to. You have to learn how to breathe. This was, I can't even get into almost the entire basis of what was taught in weightlifting. When weightlifting started to, like powerlifting, not weightlifting, powerlifting. Free weights and powerlifting that got popular, and that it was exemplified in CrossFit, to the point where I'm actually going to walk past a place that was one of the biggest CrossFit palaces that in the Northwest at a period of time. I actually met the guy who was the only Russian kettlebell trainer, certified in Oregon for a very long time. And he was, actively training people to get their certification and stuff. And it had to do with, you just had to get especially focused on breathing. That as long as you kept breathing, a lot of the fatigue wasn't as bad. And I mean, you just simply didn't, it was once you lost your breath, once you no longer were kind of, it's just rolling. I call it like rolling or flowing or something. But and that's when you start heaving. That's when the breath starts heaving, and you start leaking power. And that was the other thing, is coordination, the actual proprioception, three-dimensional proprioception during motion. And okay, so this place was once a giant CrossFit place. Look at that. It was first a big Taekwondo place. And was like this really big, beautiful CrossFit place. Big and beautiful. Look at that. 6270. Full of people doing powerlifting and climbing and chucking balls around and having a good time. And so the breathing thing became this really big deal, to the point where there's a guy, Via Militaris, here on YouTube, that he has whole videos of just techniques on how to control your breathing. So he has these videos going back to the earliest days of film, of physical culture, martial arts, training across the world. So it's a gold mine of culture. Key to this is it's a gold mine of culture that mostly is male. Even though a lot of these videos are women's groups, but I mean, like, we no longer talk about, there's a thing called Fizzy in America. It's physical culture, but it's McFadden's Fizzy, and it's it's become kind of a dance training method, similar to Joseph Pilates' method, the Pilates method. That it's mostly now something that dancers use, and female dancers is quite specifically, but yet it's still physical culture. It tells a whole story about the culture itself. Like, if you know that existed, you would know this tremendous amount about women who did dance as an art form, whether they performed or just learned a lot. There's a whole industry built around the conditioning for this. So with men, one of the key things that happened with physical culture, the psychological aspect people started to find, men started to report how this was, they started to report things about how it was changing their psyche, to start training in kettlebells, to things that they had like learned as like, especially if you were doing Kodokan judo, they typically have you do zazen for just a simple zazen, so you could learn how to do that, because it's a key part of Japanese training. Of all, it's normal to sit quietly and train people into sitting quietly. And well, when you're a Catholic or an Orthodox, this happens as well. As a child, you're trained in church, not so much to just shut up and sit there or something like that, like some indigo child of some, like quasi faithful. No, it's that it's good for you to enjoy the silence of church. It's good for you. It's a skill. It's a skill to sit with your own thoughts. It's a skill to sit in silence and do nothing. And then that becomes key to the popularity in training in Tai Chi Chuan. So when Tai Chi Chuan becomes very popular, you could find endless number of books that talk about do nothing. It's a way of training the mind to it's a way of training the mind, and it's and so this is something that then gets into Zen. Find this all the way back into the 60s of America, that they have these do nothing. What it is you're doing too much with your mind. You're thinking too discursively. Men who lose their fucking marbles typically lose their marbles in a way that when you encounter a homeboy who he's starting to lose it, he's chattering. He mumbles. And you're kind of like, homie's kind of losing it. But if you recognize what's going on, he'll be mumbling to no one all the time, smoking cigarettes, not having a listless look in the eyes. All these things in Chinese medicine all came together. Zen had a saying for it. Well, those of us who looked into it found Christianity did too. Christianity had these this is a psychic phenomena that Christians have reported in people, and Christian societies have reported in people. So it's not that it was something unique to some kind of magic of the East Orient to have somebody like, sit and face a wall in silence so as to like make it, to kind of get the demons out in some kind of kung fu martial arts movie way. And when the guy's losing his focus, the master hits him with a stick. Ya, Kwatsu, No. What this was that this is what happens when you go to confession. You sit in silence. You're supposed to be now really trying to let go of the world outside of you. You are now in the place that is holy, kadosh, set aside for a special purpose. This is when it's us in our place of this, we look at it a little bit more trite. We don't take it serious anymore. The Orthodox do. So when the Russians would talk about the mind, and they were talking about physical training, and a lot of these people, these guys who, like, America had softened a lot of its martial arts competitions. I'll just put it that way. It softened up. It wasn't like the 70s and stuff with the early days of people like, oh my God, Texas Ranger. Oh my, Norris. Like, okay, Chuck Norris, the people knew who he was because he actually could punch and kick you. He was an American who could kick you in your head and then punch you in your stomach. He wasn't like what my teacher described as, he said, no, a lot of Americans, they maybe could master a lot about kicking, but they had no hands. Or they had hands, but they had no kicks. And he's like, that was the issue with Chuck Norris, is he was the full package. He was the first American a lot of people saw in these competitions that who could punch like a boxer and kick like a taekwondo guy. And he's like, and then I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, there were martial arts fights on the television in the 70s. And I was like, wait, what? And, so because there's physical culture that we've forgotten, what happened was the Russians and the Eastern Europeans, who were now, there was no longer a USSR, they're describing to us their way of making their mind deal with what seems like an extremely difficult method of physical training. And they had a lot of just insight that then makes people who are into kettlebells and martial arts all start writing in the blogosphere about the psyche. To the point that now, I mean, there's people who this is well on 20 years on. And almost what they're known for is the psychological part of training athletes. That they're not even that well known for necessarily the incredible leaps and bounds. They made me lift, 20 more pounds. I put on 20 pounds of raw muscle and meat, or something. No, it's that they literally these people are able to deal with stress levels. That they got better at dealing with raw stress levels. So this kind of thing, okay, and again, I want to get into this. A lot of these guys got married to hot women. A lot of these guys have gotten divorced. And divorce is a woman's game. So you got to figure on average, that's what was going on, And these guys, they were teaching in a field, training people in a field that this wasn't big money. It was big money if your book made it. It was a big money if your training method had I'm going this way. Training method got popular. That's the way physical culture has always been since the quote unquote golden age of physical culture. Now so that's then there's that. The golden age of physical culture, the famous Arthur Saxon Press, people like Kate Vulcano Roberts, these strength feats that just people are like, that's not possible. You can't really do that. But it was that people figured out, how did these guys get this strong? What was their life like? Then there's that. They had written books way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Now, some of these guys say Hackenschmidt might have written some lines in their books that people won't like, but it's still Hackenschmidt. That's why we have the Hack Squad. You can't beat he's the lion, literally the lion. And so it was one of these things that I just had to touch on, that a lot of psychologists, there's no men who can come to them. They basically have a lot of problems because men aren't coming to them. Men aren't coming to them because a lot of these psychologists really don't know shit about men. They don't really have interest in men. They wouldn't know any of this stuff. They would have never looked into a lot of this stuff. They would have, I bet if they were to start researching how many people watch Monkey Steals Peach, and Monkey Steals Peach, one of the key things is they ask these men questions. They go into so these are men who saw the Cultural Revolution in some cases. These are men who grew up during the famine or right after the famine. These are people who you get to hear how somebody who's like in their 70s but moves faster than most American 30-year-olds, American 30-year-olds are asking this 70-year-old man, how should I live? That tells you a lot, And so I think a lot of these, psychologists, if they were to even see how many men come to them, but how many men go to Monkey Steals Peach, I think they would learn a lot. Yeah. And then also they're extremely afraid, everyone. This is something that Nick Fuentes made me see. This kind of, now we're back to where we started. Orthodox Christianity, the new harder Catholicism is still working itself out. It's going to be about 10 years from what it looks like before there is really a movement of young men that are willing to really man up. That you look at them and you go, no, those are the new Catholics. Right now it's Nick Fuentes with his mutant hands, and aversion to physical exercise. Soon it's going to be, and it will take probably about a decade for it to happen, guys who are they're yoked Catholics. They're back to there was once a golden age of physical culture, and that was Catholic. They were a part of it too. And that's why there was Catholic sports leagues. I think it's called something like CYSO or something like that. So the thing that I was thinking about, and then there's people don't even know, really, Irish Catholics of San Francisco went to karate. I knew of this as a thing. It wasn't wrestling and all that kind of stuff. That was a big one. Is the famous, that the wrestling of America and that tradition, especially here in Oregon, they're especially proud of their tradition. Extremely highly technical wrestlers, and it's also translated into them having very good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructors here in Oregon, and really world renowned, extremely technical, and that's how they get their wins is very, very technical ability and stuff, and so something I was that with Fuentes, it's you're going to see it's going to take about 10 years for the Catholics to really kind of figure out how they're going to have a method by which that they could easily present to somebody, how do you tame your mind? And it's coming. The Orthodox already got it. The Orthodox already have their introduction to being Orthodox. Big part of it, taming the mind in various ways. But the Catholics this is going to start happening with the men, and it's going to be considered dissident. It's going to be, of course, quietude is one of the traditions it comes from. I even heard a millennial Catholic, there was this article on quietude, and he got all upset. And I'm sitting there you've never heard of this, and I didn't even say anything in the chat. This was somebody who I was like, okay, no, this was a totally normal thing to do. This is a totally normal thing to do for Catholics, apparently before you were born, which I didn't quite realize. That idea threw me off, because I'm am I that much older than him? Did quietude cease to exist in Catholic training how much, and then how much older am I than him, and he was a real active Catholic, and he had never heard of this. It really threw me off. But methods like that, they work better than a lot of methods of many psychologists. And then male self-improvement. Okay, that's one of the most normal things in book form to find in the English language. going back 100 and some years. Improving yourself is one of the most common things to find men write about. This idea of self-improvement has never, it's not some new thing. It's that what we've seen is that the books that are supposed to big up, really they're supposed to be kind of self-improvement books for women. Now the young men have figured this out. It's a book that says the words "you deserve" in it a lot. Not, and what are men's self-improvement books? Books that say you should a lot. I thought that was pretty clever when these guys wrote that. Yeah, posted that. So it was, so I just wanted to put that out there. That was like, no. People aren't quite getting it, or psychologists aren't getting it. And it's because, then I thought about it, I'm like, no. It's about money. It has to be about money. It always has to do with that. So, yeah. Talk to you later.